Now, fresh anti-government protesters have broken out in Iran. Students beginning a new university term in the capital, Tehran, have rallied to remember the thousands killed in recent demonstrations. The US is building up its naval task force in the region. President Trump has threatened another attack on Iran if the regime refuses to agree to a deal cutting its nuclear program.
Iranian students chant anti-government slogans outside Amirkabir University in Tehran. More protests were held at Sharif University, also in Iran's capital. Scuffles appeared to break out between those opposing the Iranian regime and those supporting it. Some of the footage has been blurred to protect their identities. These are the first large rallies seen in Iran since January, when authorities crushed widespread demonstrations. Protests have also been held in other parts of the world, including Barcelona in Spain, where they remembered the thousands of Iranians killed in January's protests. All this as the US builds up its military presence in the region and beyond. These aircraft have been filmed at an airbase in Portugal's Azores archipelago. Meanwhile, the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, has been seen sailing in waters off Gibraltar. Donald Trump has warned Iran that military action is possible if a deal over curbing its nuclear program isn't reached soon.
They better negotiate a fair deal.
But Iran's president has said his country won't be pressurized by the US military build-up.
By God's grace and strength, we will not lower our heads in the face of these difficulties. Even though the outside world and global powers are unfairly pressing us to submit, we will not bow our heads.
Fears of a looming conflict have prompted several countries, including Germany, to warn citizens to leave Iran.
Now, Ross Harrison joins me now. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute and author of Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Great to have you with us. I wonder what you make of the new protests in Iran. What do you think they can achieve at this point?
Well, Anthony, it's hard to say at this moment. When we think back to the Iranian Revolution, 1978-79, we saw a similar kind of rhythm. These protests that occurred on 2 or 3 university campuses in Tehran occur on the heels of the end of the 40-day mourning mourning process for the thousands of protesters that were killed just last month. And during the Iranian Revolution, we saw a cycle of 40 days of protests, 40 days more protests on the heels of a 40-day mourning process, and there was a momentum that was built over time that led to the Iranian Revolution. If that would occur now, if you would see a spreading of these protests and then a government, a equally repressive suppression of those protests that we saw last month, they could be quite significant and could affect the looming military conflict between the United States and Iran. But it's too early to assess at this point.
Ross, do you think the US military presence near Iran in such great numbers keep these protesters safe, or are they risking their lives by protesting again?
Well, they're certainly risking their lives because over the last number of years, even absent the looming attack by the United States, the government has a pattern of suppressing protests quite violently, the most violent being this past January. So I think the risk to the protesters exists irrespective of U.S. potential involvement in the region. But I think the regime being under siege a bit, both internally because of the protests that occurred last month and because of the looming possible attack, certainly increases the jitteriness of the regime and is likely to possibly lead to an overreaction. So, but the regime's normal standard operating procedure is to suppress the protests violently in order to keep them down and prevent them from spreading.
Everything about the US build-up says they are getting ready for an attack. How do you read the situation?
Well, you know, when the first carrier group went to the U.S. carrier group went to the region, led by the SS Lincoln, we could construe that as possibly a show of force to increase the strength of the hand of the United States in negotiations. But when the second carrier group sailed towards the region, the SS Ford, I believe it was, that's a huge commitment of naval assets for the United States. And it's hard to imagine that being in place or put in place without the real intention of some kind of a military conflict. So I know that there's some negotiations and back and forth statements from the White House and from the Islamic Republic, from the leadership of the Islamic Republic. But I think the threat of a military action is quite high at this point. Absent some kind of progress over the next few days, diplomatic progress over the next few days.
Brilliant, Ross. Ross Harrison, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.